Hey garden lovers, welcome back to our channel. Today, we are diving into something almost no one talks about, the hidden reason why rose plants bloom the way they do. And trust me, once you understand this, you will never look at your roses the same way again. Imagine this. You step into your garden one early morning. The air is cool and fresh, and as you walk past your rose plant, something stops you in your tracks. Deep green leaves are glistening with dew, and right there, among the thorns and stems, you see it, a tightly wrapped bud slowly beginning to open. Layer after layer of delicate petals unfold in shades of red, pink, yellow, or white. The fragrance is soft at first, then grows stronger, sweeter, almost intoxicating. You stop for a second, look closer, and your first thought is simple: why does this plant create something so incredibly beautiful? Because here's the truth most people do not know. Roses do not bloom just because you water them or give them sunlight. There is something much deeper happening, something hidden beneath the surface, something that connects science, history, culture, and even human emotion. Some gardeners grow roses for decades and never truly understand why their plant blooms abundantly one season and barely at all the next. Others plant a rose for the first time and suddenly it explodes with flowers, filling their entire garden with color and fragrance. So, the real question is not just why roses bloom, but what it actually means when they do. Today, we're going to uncover that mystery completely, step by step. And here is the shocking part. Science and ancient traditions, two completely different worlds, both lead to the exact same conclusion. Before we go deeper, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe, because what you are about to learn is something most gardeners never discover, even after years of experience. Now, let's start with something simple. The rose, known scientifically as rosa, is one of the oldest and most beloved flowering plants in the entire world. You see it everywhere, in home gardens, public parks, wedding ceremonies, art, poetry, and even religious symbols. It appears in nearly every culture on Earth. And the reason is very simple. This plant creates one of the most stunning displays of beauty that nature has to offer. But here is where things get interesting. For a plant that is so famous, so celebrated, and so deeply loved, the process of how and why it blooms is still a mystery to most people. Roses are not like other plants. They do not bloom randomly. They do not bloom just because they are alive. Roses bloom under very specific conditions, and when those conditions are met, something extraordinary happens. When a rose plant blooms, people from completely different cultures, backgrounds, and belief systems all stop and pay attention. They take photos. They smell the flowers. They cut stems and bring them indoors. Some people even talk to their roses, believing the plant responds to love and care. For generations across Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas, this plant was never seen as just decoration. It was seen as something much more meaningful. In ancient Persia, now modern-day Iran, roses were considered sacred. They were planted in royal gardens and used in spiritual ceremonies. People believed that the fragrance of a rose carried prayers to the heavens. The bloom was not just a flower, it was a bridge between the earth and the divine. While that may sound spiritual, there is an interesting physical aspect to it as well. The scent molecules released by rose petals are chemically designed to travel long distances through the air. In nature, this attracts pollinators like bees and butterflies. But in human experience, the same fragrance triggers emotional responses in the brain, feelings of calm, happiness, and peace. In European traditions, especially during the Victorian era, roses became symbols of deep communication. Different colors meant different messages. A red rose symbolized passionate love. A white rose represented purity and new beginnings. A yellow rose can mean friendship or sometimes jealousy, depending on the context. A pink rose often conveyed admiration, grace, or gratitude. People use roses to say things they cannot speak out loud. And the act of giving someone a rose in full bloom was not casual. It was intentional, meaningful, and emotionally powerful. There is also a common practice in many cultures of planting roses near the entrance of a home or along pathways. According to traditional beliefs, blooming roses bring positive energy, protection, and prosperity to the household. In some communities, when a rose plant blooms abundantly, it is seen as a sign that the family living there is in harmony, that the home is filled with love, and that blessings are present. Now, if we look at this from a scientific perspective, it becomes even more interesting. Roses improve the environment around them. Their roots stabilize soil. Their flowers support pollinator populations. And their presence in a garden often indicates that the soil quality, water balance, and sunlight conditions are all in good order. A blooming rose does not just look beautiful. It actually reflects the health of the entire ecosystem around it. So again, we see two different explanations, one spiritual and one scientific, leading to the same result. But everything changes when we ask the deeper question: what actually triggers a rose to bloom? Why does it happen when it does? And why do some roses bloom more than others? In ancient botanical traditions, particularly in Chinese and Indian systems of plant knowledge, there was a belief that roses bloom when they feel safe. Not safe in the way humans understand safety, but safe in terms of their environment. The right temperature, the right amount of water, the right nutrients, and the right amount of stress. Yes, stress. Because here is something almost no one talks about. Roses need a certain level of challenge to bloom at their best. In some traditions, especially among experienced gardeners in the Middle East and Mediterranean regions, there's a saying that translates roughly to this: a rose that is loved too much will grow leaves, but a rose that is tested will give you flowers. This might sound strange at first, but it points to a deep understanding of how the plant actually works. Now, here comes something even more surprising. In traditional rose cultivation, which has been practiced for over 5,000 years, there are specific techniques used to encourage blooming. Gardeners would prune their roses at certain times of the year, not just to shape the plant, but to shock it slightly. They would reduce watering during specific periods. They would expose the plant to cooler night temperatures. All of this was designed to send a message to the rose. It is time to reproduce. It is time to bloom. If we bring in the science of plant biology, the connection becomes even clearer. Roses bloom in response to environmental signals. These signals include day length, temperature fluctuations, water availability, and nutrient levels in the soil. When a rose plant detects that conditions are favorable but not perfect, it shifts energy from vegetative growth, which means leaves and stems, into reproductive growth, which means buds and flowers. This process is called flowering induction. It is controlled by hormones inside the plant, especially ones called gibberellins and florigen. These hormones are triggered by external conditions. For example, many rose varieties need a period of cold dormancy in winter. During this time, the plant rests, but internally it is preparing. When spring arrives and temperatures begin to rise, the plant recognizes a change. It knows that the season for reproduction has begun. That is when the buds start to form. Interestingly, rose plants also communicate with their surroundings through chemical signals. When a rose is healthy and thriving, it releases volatile organic compounds into the air. These compounds can influence nearby plants and even deter certain pests. This chemical communication is part of how roses survive and adapt in their environment. The more balanced the environment, the stronger these signals become, and the more energy the plant can dedicate to creating those stunning blooms we all love. Now, let's look at the scientific explanation more closely, because this is where everything truly connects. Roses bloom under very specific conditions. First, they need maturity. A young rose plant, especially one grown from a cutting, may take 1 to 2 years before it is ready to produce flowers. It needs to establish strong roots, healthy stems, and a solid structure. Second, they need the right photoperiod. This means the amount of daylight they receive each day. Roses are sensitive to seasonal changes in light. In many varieties, longer days in late spring signal that it is time to bloom. This is why you see the most abundant rose blooms between late spring and early summer. Third, and most importantly, they need balanced stress. Not damage, not neglect, but small natural challenges. This can include pruning, which removes old growth and redirects energy into new buds. Slight water restriction, which signals to the plant that resources are limited and reproduction is urgent. Temperature variation between day and night, which mimics natural seasonal cycles. And control feeding, not too much nitrogen, which creates leaves, but enough phosphorus and potassium, which support flowers. These conditions send a signal to the plant that the environment is changing and it is time to reproduce. Blooming is the plant's way of ensuring survival. It creates flowers to attract pollinators. Those pollinators help the plant produce seeds, and those seeds carry the plant's genetics into the future. Now, here is the powerful connection that ties everything together. These stress signals are not signs of a bad environment. They are actually signs of a balanced and stable one. Not too much comfort, not too little care, just the right conditions. And that is exactly what traditional beliefs describe as harmony or good energy. There is also another important factor. Roses are incredibly responsive plants. They react to how they are treated. Studies have shown that plants, including roses, respond to sound vibrations, touch, and even the presence of humans. While we cannot say they have emotions, we can say they are sensitive to their surroundings. When a gardener tends to their roses with care, consistency, and attention, the plant often responds with healthier growth and more blooms. In fact, research conducted at multiple botanical institutions has demonstrated that roses grown in environments where they receive regular human interaction, such as gardens that are visited daily, tend to produce more flowers than those in neglected spaces. This does not mean the plant knows you're there in a conscious way, but it does mean that the small changes you create, better air circulation from your movement, the carbon dioxide you exhale, even the minor vibrations from your footsteps, all contribute to a more dynamic and stimulating environment for plant. So, the truth becomes very clear. A rose blooms when the environment around it becomes right. Not perfect, but balanced, stable, and supportive. It blooms when it has been given time to mature, when it has experienced the natural rhythm of seasons, and when it has been gently challenged to put its energy into reproduction. Now, if you want to increase your chances of seeing abundant blooms, the process is simple, but requires consistency. Provide at least 6 hours of direct sunlight each day. Roses are sun-loving plants, and they need strong light to produce flowers. Water deeply but infrequently. Allow the soil to dry slightly between watering sessions. This encourages deep root growth and prevents diseases. Prune your roses at the right time. For most varieties, this means late winter or early spring, just before new growth begins. Remove dead or weak stems and cut back healthy ones to encourage branching. Use a balanced fertilizer that is higher in phosphorus. Phosphorus supports bud formation and flowering. Apply it in early spring and again in midsummer. Mulch around the base of the plant to retain moisture and regulate soil temperature. Protect your roses from extreme heat and frost, but allow them to experience natural seasonal changes. Check your soil pH regularly. Roses prefer slightly acidic soil with a pH between 6.0 and 6.5. If your soil is too alkaline, the plant cannot absorb nutrients properly, even if they are present. You can adjust pH using sulfur or organic compost. Also, pay attention to airflow. Roses need good air circulation to prevent fungal diseases like black spot and powdery mildew. Avoid planting them too close together. Space them properly so each plant gets enough room to breathe and grow. And most importantly, give them time. A rose plant needs at least one full growing season to establish itself before it can bloom abundantly. And when it finally happens, when those tight buds begin to swell, when the first hint of color appears, when the petals slowly unfold and that unmistakable fragrance fills the air, you will realize something truly powerful. This plant, which has survived storms, heat, cold, and challenges, chooses that exact moment to create something breathtaking. Not randomly, but because everything around it has aligned perfectly. And maybe that is the deeper message behind all of this. Even in difficult conditions, even when growth feels slow or invisible, when the environment becomes right, life always finds a way to bloom. Roses teach us patience. They teach us that beauty takes time. They teach us that the most stunning transformations happen not in comfort, but in balance. Not in excess, but in harmony. So now, I want to ask you something. Do you grow roses? Have you ever watched a bud slowly open over several days? Have you ever stood in your garden at sunrise and smelled that first bloom of the season? And if you plant a rose after watching this, you will understand exactly why it blooms when it does. If you found this helpful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Take care of your garden, and remember, every bloom has a story.